On the day of my mother's funeral, my own father took me behind the chapel and said, "Now you're going to take her place. Turn around." That's when I discovered he wasn't a widower. He was a murderer. Hi, my dear ones, my sweethearts. How are you all doing? I'm Grandma Sandra. I'm 78 years old, and I live here in the Eastwood neighborhood, right here in Birmingham, Alabama. I was born in a small town called Clarksville, a little place in the countryside that you might know, but nowadays it's here in the city where I make my life. You know, this morning I was here in my kitchen doing my favorite pastime, preparing fresh biscuits to sell at the little park in the neighborhood. See, my children, after I retired, I discovered I had a real talent for making biscuits. I started this almost by accident, you know? I had some neighbors who always asked me to make them when they came to visit, and then a neighbor, Mrs. Ruth, who lives on the corner, said, "Sandra, why don't you start selling these biscuits? They're the best I've ever tasted in my life." And that's how it started. Today I wake up early, around 5 in the morning, sift the flour I buy at Joe's Market, season them with that sharp cheddar cheese, and make about 20-30 biscuits a day. I sell them right there in the park, under the shade of an oak tree. People already know me. They know that every morning Grandma Sandra is there with her warm little biscuits. My home is quite simple, you know? It's a small house, but tidy. I have my potted plants on the porch, some ferns that I love to water in the evening, some petunias that look spectacular when they're in bloom. My grandson, Junior, my youngest daughter's son, comes here often after school to do his homework with me. He's 12 years old and smart as a whip. He always asks me about the old stories, wants to know what life was like in my time. And speaking of that, my dear ones, before you click that red like button and subscribe here to the channel, which makes me very happy when you do that, you know, I wanted to make a special request. Tell me here in the comments, from which corner of the United States are you watching me? And what time is it where you are? Are you watching this, Grandma, in the morning with your coffee, after lunch resting, or in the evening before bed? I always read all the comments and get emotional knowing that there are people from all over listening to this old lady here. Tell me, I want to know where all this love comes from. Let's make a chain of love throughout the entire country. You know, my children, today I wanted to tell you a story that I've carried in my chest for many, many years. It's a heavy story, one that touches the heart, but it's important to tell. It's about something that happened to me when I was very young, back in Clarksville, in rural Alabama. A story about family, about secrets that we sometimes keep, and about how sometimes the people who should protect us are precisely the ones who hurt us the most. It's one of those stories that takes courage to tell, you know? But I think this way. If my story can help one person who's going through something similar, if it can open someone's eyes or give strength to those who need it, then it's worth sharing with you. So grab your coffee, settle into your chair, and come with me on this journey. I'm going to take you back to Clarksville in the 1960s, when I was a girl who thought she knew her father, who thought she knew her family. But life, my dear ones, sometimes teaches us very painful truths about the people we love most. Oh, my dear ones, when I close my eyes and think about my childhood in Clarksville, it seems like it was yesterday, and at the same time, it seems like it was a lifetime ago. I was born in 1946, in a very simple wooden house, on a dirt road near the Baptist church, there in the center of town. In those days, Clarksville was very small, everyone knew each other, and families were large, very different from today. My father's name was Robert, but everyone in town called him Bob. He was a tall, strong man, tanned from the sun, always very serious. He worked as a ranch hand on a large farm a few miles outside of town. He left home before sunrise, riding his chestnut horse, and only came back when it was getting dark. When he came home, he always came tired, with those clothes smelling of leather and sweat, his boots dusty from the road. My mother, poor thing, was named Elizabeth. She was a small woman, very petite, with green eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She took care of the house and us, the children. There were 4 of us, me, who was the oldest, then came my brother William, who was 2 years younger than me, Frances, whom we called Franny, and the baby Thomas, who was almost 10 years younger than me. Our house was small, but my mother made it seem cozy. It only had 3 rooms, the living room in the front, which was where the wooden table we ate at was, my parents' bedroom, and another small room where I slept with Franny in one bed, and the boys slept in bunk beds against the wall. The kitchen was outside, under a tin roof, with a wood stove that my mother lit every day early to make coffee. I remember waking up to the smell of coffee mixed with burning wood and the sound of my mother's pans preparing breakfast. It was always the same thing: strong black coffee, biscuits, or grits with fresh milk that the neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, brought us every morning. My father ate quickly, always in silence, grabbed his leather hat, and left for work. In those days in Clarksville, children played in the street. My siblings and I, along with the neighborhood kids, spent all day out there. We played tag, hide and seek, hopscotch that we drew on the ground with pieces of chalk. The boys flew kites made of colored tissue paper that our mothers saved from birthday parties. I loved playing house with Franny, making pretend meals with leaves and pebbles. When it rained, and boy, in Alabama the rain was a party because it could go months without a drop falling, we'd run into the street to take a rain shower. My mother would yell from the door, "Sandra, bring that girl inside before she catches a cold." But she herself liked to see us happy, you know. Sometimes she'd even smile seeing our joy. My mother was very affectionate, always had a caress, a little kiss, a pat on our heads. She knew how to make some papaya candies that were delicious, and whenever she had money saved up, she'd buy us some colored sugar lollipops at Mr. Charlie's store. It was our greatest joy. But with my father, oh, how things were different. He was very quiet, very somber. When he came home from work, the whole house fell silent. We couldn't make noise, couldn't run through the house. He'd sit in the wooden chair in the living room and stay there quiet, just staring at the wall. My mother served his dinner in silence too, always very careful not to make noise with the plates. I remember we were afraid of him, you know. It wasn't a fear of getting beaten, because back then, he didn't hit us, no. But it was a fear of him getting angry, of him yelling. Because when he yelled, oh, the whole house trembled. His voice was strong, thick, and when he was irritated, everyone stayed as quiet as a mouse. My mother always told us, "You obey your father, you hear? Don't make him nervous because he works so hard to support you." And we really obeyed. When he arrived, we'd run inside the house and stay quiet until bedtime. But there was something I noticed and didn't quite understand back then. Sometimes, when my father came home, my mother had bruises on her arm or a purple mark on her face that she said she got from falling or hitting the door. She always had an explanation, you know. "Oh, Sandra, your mother is clumsy. I tripped on a rock in the yard." Or, "I hit my arm on the corner of the table by accident." I was a child and believed it, right? I thought my mother was really kind of accident-prone. But there was something in the way she spoke, a sadness in her eyes, that I couldn't understand. She'd be quieter on those days, wouldn't hum while doing housework like she used to. And my father, on those days, was even more frowning than normal. Sometimes I'd see him looking at my mother in a strange way, as if he was angry at her for something she had done. But I didn't know what. That's how I grew up in Clarksville, between playing on the dusty street, my mother's affection, and the respectful fear of my father. It was a simple life, a rural family life, where men commanded and women obeyed, where children didn't question adults, and where some secrets were kept behind closed doors. I had no idea that those small signs, those purple marks, that sadness in my mother's eyes, were just the beginning of a much darker truth that I would only discover years later, when it was no longer time to save her. My dear ones, it was when I turned 15 in 1961 that things in our house began to change in a way that shook everything I knew about my family. Until then, I lived in that little child's world, playing in the street, helping my mother with household chores, without really understanding what happened behind closed doors when we weren't watching. I remember as if it were today, the day of my 15th birthday. My mother had made a cornbread cake, my favorite, and had invited some neighbors to celebrate with me. It was a Saturday. My father hadn't gone to work because the boss had given the ranch hands the day off. I was so happy, you know. 15 was an important age for us back then. It meant I was already becoming a young lady. The neighbors brought some simple gifts: a wooden comb, a piece of scented soap, some colored hair ribbons. Mrs. Wilson brought a glass of fresh milk from her cow to go with the cake. Everything was so cheerful, with the women talking in our small living room, laughing at the stories they told each other. That's when my father appeared at the door. He had gone to Mr. Charlie's store to buy some cigarettes, but when he came back and saw all that commotion in the house, his face completely changed. He got frowning, with that dismissive face I already knew well. "What's all this racket in here?" he asked with his thick voice, standing at the living room door. "Sounds like a rich folks' party, so much noise." My mother quickly got up from the chair where she was sitting and went to him, kind of nervous. "It's Sandra's birthday, Bob, 15 years old. I just called the neighbors over for some coffee and a piece of cake." I saw him look at her in a way I had never seen before. It was a hard, cold look, as if she had done something very wrong. The neighbors all went quiet at once, feeling the heavy atmosphere that descended on the room. "Party for what?" he said, taking his hat off his head and throwing it on the table, right in the middle of the little plates with cake. 15 isn't the age for parties, it's the age to work, and you there wasting the household money on foolishness. Mrs. Wilson, who was a brave lady, tried to smooth things over. "Oh, Bob, it's just a simple little cake." Elizabeth made it with the cornmeal left over from last week, but he cut her off mid-sentence. "Mrs. Wilson, you take care of your house and I'll take care of mine." His voice came out so thick, so threatening, that the poor woman shrank in her chair. That's when something happened that marked me for life. My mother, trying to defend her friends and smooth over the situation, spoke softly. "Bob, the neighbors just came to keep me company. It doesn't cost anything to have a little joy in the house." That was it. It was like she had lit a powder keg. My father turned to her slowly, very slowly, and I saw something in his eyes that gave me a chill. It was anger, but it wasn't just anger. It was something darker, more dangerous. "Are you contradicting me, Elizabeth?" he asked, taking a step toward her. "In front of everyone, you're disrespecting me?" My mother went white as paper. Her little hands started to tremble, and she shook her head no. "No, Bob, I'm not. I just meant—" But he didn't let her finish. He raised his right hand, very slowly, like someone about to slap, and my mother curled up, closed her eyes waiting for the blow. The neighbors were paralyzed, not knowing what to do. For a moment that seemed like an eternity. He stood there with his hand in the air. Then he looked around and saw that everyone was watching. He lowered his hand, but got very close to my mother and spoke softly, but in a tone that everyone heard. "Later we'll talk about respect. Alone." The neighbors quickly got up and started saying goodbye, making up excuses, that they had to go make lunch, that they had forgotten a pot on the stove. In 2 minutes, our house was empty, just with the family. The cornbread cake was there on the table, cut in half, and that heavy atmosphere filled the whole house. My father grabbed his hat and left without saying anything else. I heard the sound of his horse's hooves moving away. My mother stood in the middle of the room, looking at the cake crumbs scattered on the floor. Her little hands were still trembling. That's when she bent down to start cleaning up the mess, and I saw something that broke my heart. She was crying, but trying to hide it. Thick tears ran down her face, dripping on the floor along with the cake crumbs. "Mom." I started to speak, but she gestured for me to be quiet. "Go play with your siblings, Sandra, and don't make noise." Her voice came out all shaky. That night, when my father came back home, I pretended I was sleeping, but kept my ear open. I heard them talking in the bedroom, but couldn't understand the words. I just knew his voice was low but hard, and that she only answered yes or okay to everything he said. The next day, Sunday, my mother appeared with a purple mark on her forehead. When I asked what had happened, she said she had hit the corner of the bedroom door during the night when she went to get water for him. But I was 15 years old. I wasn't a little child anymore who believed any story. And for the first time in my life, I began to suspect that those purple marks my mother always had, those bruises she explained as falls and stumbles, maybe weren't accidents at all. It was that Sunday that I also noticed that my mother started walking differently around the house. Quieter, more cautious, as if she was always paying attention to where my father was and how he was feeling. When he came home from work, she'd stop whatever she was doing and go meet him at the door, asking if he wanted coffee, if he was hungry, if he needed anything. And he started talking to me differently too. He was no longer that distant but respectful father from before. Now he looked at me with eyes that made me uncomfortable, especially when I was helping my mother in the kitchen and he'd stand at the door, just watching. One day, about 2 weeks after my birthday, he came home from the ranch earlier than usual and found my mother and me washing clothes in the yard. We were talking softly about women's things and laughing from time to time. When she saw him standing there watching us, my mother tensed up immediately. "Too much work to be laughing like that," he said. "Sandra, come here." I approached him, somewhat apprehensive. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder and squeezed hard. "You're growing up, girl. You're becoming a young lady. But don't go thinking that because of that you can be partying and disrespecting the rules of this house. You understand?" "I understand, Dad," I replied, feeling his fingers dig into my shoulder. "Good, because in this house I'm the one who commands. And what I command, everyone obeys. Your mother knows that very well, don't you, Elizabeth?" My mother stopped scrubbing the clothes and looked at him. "Yes, Bob, everyone knows." But when her eyes met mine, I saw there a cry for help that still hurts my chest today. It was as if she was trying to warn me of something, prepare me for something, but couldn't speak openly. That night, lying in my bed, I began to understand that my happy childhood in Clarksville was coming to an end. Something very bad was approaching our house, and I felt deep in my heart that my mother knew exactly what it was. Oh, my dear ones, the months that followed after my 15th birthday were the darkest of my life. What had started as threats and hard looks turned into something much worse, into violence that still hurts me to remember. My father started coming home earlier and earlier from the ranch, always with some excuse, that the work was lighter, that the boss had dismissed the ranch hands earlier, that he needed to resolve some things at home. But the truth was that he wanted to keep an eye on my mother, controlling every movement she made. The first time I witnessed him really beating her was on an October afternoon when the heat was scorching in Alabama. I had gone to get water from the well in the backyard when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It was like the sound of something hitting wood, followed by a muffled groan. I slowly approached the kitchen door and saw a scene that froze my blood. My father had my mother cornered against the wall, holding her by the neck with one hand and with the other hitting her in the face. It wasn't a slap. No, my children. It was a real punch, heavy, that made her head swing from side to side. "I told you not to leave the house without telling me," he yelled quietly, trying not to draw the neighbors' attention. "I told you that you couldn't go to Mrs. Wilson's house without my permission." My mother tried to explain, but could barely speak because he was squeezing her neck. "Bob, I just went to return the dish towel she lent." "Liar!" He gave another punch, this time in her stomach, and my mother doubled over, trying to catch her breath. "You went there to gossip about me, that's it. You went to tell others that I beat you." I stood there, paralyzed, not knowing whether to run to help her or go call someone. But before I could move, my father saw me standing at the door. For a second, our eyes met. I saw something there that I'll never forget. There was no shame at all on his face. There was no regret. There was only anger at being discovered. "Sandra," he said, letting go of my mother, who slid down the wall until sitting on the floor. "Come here." I didn't want to, but my legs took me to him. My mother, still trying to breathe properly, made a gesture with her hand for me not to come close, but I couldn't disobey my father. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had just beaten my mother, and spoke very softly in my ear. "What you saw here never happened. Your mother fell by herself, hit the corner of the table. That's what happened. You understand?" I nodded yes, but he squeezed my shoulder until it hurt. "Say you understand." "I understand, Dad," I managed to whisper. "Good. Because if you tell anyone, I'm going to have to teach you too how a woman should behave in this house. And it won't just be with words, no. Understand?" At that moment, looking into his eyes up close, I understood that my childhood was completely over. I was no longer his protected daughter. I had become something else, a dangerous witness who needed to be controlled. In the following months, the house became hell. My father found any excuse to beat my mother. If the food was too hot, if it was cold, if she took too long to answer when he arrived, if she said something he didn't like. And always, always, he made sure I saw it. It was as if he wanted to teach me something, you know? As if he was showing me what a woman's place was in his house. I noticed he looked at me during the beatings he gave her, checking if I was paying attention, if I was learning the lesson. My mother started to become different, thinner, quieter, always with marks on her body that she tried to hide with clothes. She stopped singing while working, stopped smiling at the silly little things my younger siblings did. It was as if the joy had dried up inside her. And the worst part is that she started to distance herself from me too. I think she was afraid that if we got too close, he'd get jealous or suspicious. So she spoke to me only what was necessary, gave me orders about what to do in the house, but never again had those moments of affection we had before. One night, I woke up to strange noises coming from their room. I thought it was another fight, but it was different. It was my mother moaning softly, as if in pain, and my father saying something that disgusted me. "Stop crying, Elizabeth. It's your wifely duty. And now it's also your punishment for leaving the house yesterday without telling me." I covered my ears and pretended I was sleeping, but I understood that he hurt her in other ways too, ways that a 15-year-old girl shouldn't even know existed. It was around this time that my father started paying more attention to me. Not in an affectionate, fatherly way, no. It was attention that made me afraid. He noticed when I was growing, when my body was changing. Sometimes I felt him watching me when I was sweeping the yard or washing dishes, and that look gave me chills. One afternoon, when my mother had gone to the store to buy flour, he came home from the ranch and found me alone at home. My siblings had gone out to play in the street. "Sandra," he called from the door. "Come here." I went, drying my hands on my apron. He kept looking at me in a strange way, from top to bottom, as if evaluating something. "You're becoming a beautiful young woman," he said, getting closer. "Just like your mother when she was young." Something in the way he spoke made me very afraid. I tried to move away, but he grabbed my arm. "Where are you going? Don't you like talking to your father?" "I do, Dad," I lied. "Then stay there quietly." He ran his hand over my face, in a caress that had nothing fatherly about it. "Your mother is getting old, Sandra. Tired, but you're at the perfect point." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but the fear I felt was so great that I started to tremble. That's when I heard my mother's voice coming from the street, talking to a neighbor. My father quickly let go of me and went to sit in his chair as if nothing had happened. But when my mother came into the house and saw our faces, mine of fear, his of anger at being interrupted, she understood right away what had almost happened. That night, she came to my bed after everyone was asleep and whispered in my ear, "Sandra, never be alone at home with him again. Never again. Do you promise me?" I promised, but deep down I knew that such a promise would be hard to keep. My father was smart, patient. He knew how to wait for the right time, and I felt that time was getting closer every day. My mother knew it too. Lately, she looked at me with such a deep sadness in her eyes that it seemed like she was saying goodbye to me, as if she knew she wouldn't be able to protect me for much longer. And she really couldn't. My dear ones, the last straw that broke the camel's back happened on a Tuesday in December 1961. It was the time of the late Christmas bazaar in Clarksville. You know how it is. In small towns, the festivities extend. And there was a prayer meeting at the Baptist church that my mother always attended. She had asked my father's permission to go, and he had let her, but with one condition. She had to come back before sunset. That day, the prayer meeting went longer than normal because the pastor had announced some important things about building the new chapel. My mother had stayed to help the other ladies organize the church benches and clean the candlesticks after the prayer. When she got home, it was already getting dark, and I saw on her face the desperation of someone who knew they were going to pay dearly for that delay. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard her footsteps coming through the yard. My heart raced because I knew my father was waiting, sitting in that wooden chair of his in the living room, looking at the wall clock that mercilessly marked the hours. When he heard her footsteps, he didn't even look at the door. He just spoke, with that icy voice I already knew well. "What time is it, Elizabeth?" "Bob, I can explain," she started, taking the veil off her head with trembling hands. "The pastor asked the ladies to help." I asked what time it is. He cut her off mid-sentence without even raising his eyes from the floor. It's almost 7 at night," she whispered, and I saw her little hands were already trembling. "And what time did I tell you to come back?" "Before sunset," she answered, and her voice came out so low you could barely hear it. "So you disobeyed me." He slowly got up from the chair, and I dropped the wooden spoon I was stirring the beans with. My blood froze. "In front of the whole neighborhood, you disobeyed me. You made light of my authority." I ran out of the kitchen and saw my siblings, who were playing in the yard with some sticks and pebbles. They felt the heavy atmosphere and ran inside the house. Little Thomas, who was only 6 years old, clung to my mother's skirt, sensing danger like a frightened animal. "Get out of there, boy," my father ordered my brother, with that voice that didn't accept disobedience. "Go play outside and take the others." "No, Dad," I spoke, in a courage that I don't know where it came from. The words came out of my mouth before I could even think properly. "Let him stay. He didn't do anything wrong. Nobody here did anything wrong." The silence that descended on the house was terrible. It was as if even the crickets outside had stopped singing. My father turned to me very slowly, with a face I had never seen, a face of pure hatred that made me want to run and hide. "You want to learn along with her too?" he asked, and his voice was so low, so dangerous, that it gave me chills. "Is that it? Want to learn how women should respect men in this house?" My mother, seeing the danger I had put myself in, pushed Thomas in my direction. "Take the children, Sandra. Take them and get out of here. Go to Mrs. Wilson's house and stay there until I come get you." But I couldn't move. For the first time in my life, I stood there, planted in the middle of the living room, looking into my father's eyes. There was a voice inside my head screaming for me to run, but there was another voice, stronger, saying I couldn't abandon my mother. "I won't let you beat her for going to church," I said, and the words came out firmer than I expected. She was in God's house, helping the pastor. She didn't do anything wrong. What happened next was an explosion of violence that still gives me nightmares. My father went to his room and came back with the leather belt he used to work on the ranch. It was a thick, heavy belt with a large metal buckle that he always kept well polished. When I saw him coming back with that thing in his hand, I felt my legs go weak. "Now you two are going to learn once and for all what a woman's place is in this house," he said, folding the belt and testing its weight in his hand. First he went after my mother. She tried to run, but he reached her before she got to the door. The first blow hit her back, and the sound of the leather hitting was terrible, like a whip cracking. My mother screamed and fell to her knees on the dirt floor. 26 years married to me," he said between the blows. and you still haven't learned to obey." The belt went up and down, up and down. The metal buckle cut through her clothes and skin, and I saw the blood starting to appear. My mother tried to protect herself with her arms, but the blows were many and very strong. "Stop! Stop hitting her!" I screamed, and before I could think about what I was doing, I threw myself over my mother, trying to protect her with my own body. That's when he turned all the rage on me. The belt started falling on my back, on my head, on my arms. The pain was unbearable. It was like they were cutting my skin with a razor. Each blow from the metal buckle left a deep cut, and I felt the blood soaking my clothes. "A child who confronts me?" he shouted, without stopping the beating. "A child who doesn't respect her father? Then you'll learn together." My siblings were crying in the corner of the room, hugging each other, seeing that scene of horror. Little Thomas screamed, "Stop, Dad! Stop! You're going to kill her!" But that only increased his rage. It was as if seeing the children cry, seeing the fear on their faces, only fueled the violence even more. My mother, even bleeding, even broken with pain, managed to get up from the floor. I'll never forget her face at that moment. It was a face of total desperation, of a mother who knew she could lose her daughter if she didn't do something. "Stop hitting my daughter," she shouted, with a strength I had never seen in her. "Kill me if you want, but leave her alone. She's a child." And then she did something that changed everything. She threw herself on top of him and tried to snatch the belt from his hand. For a few seconds, they fought over the belt, pulling to each side. My mother was using a strength that came from desperation, the strength of a mother protecting her child. "Let go of that belt, Robert," she screamed, trying to twist his arm. "Enough! That's enough!" For a moment, it seemed like she was going to make it. She was managing to loosen his fingers, was almost taking the belt from his hand. But my father was much stronger, and the rage had given him extra strength. He gave her a push with all the strength he had. A violent, brutal push that made my mother fly through the air and hit her head on the corner of the heavy wooden table that was in the living room. The noise was terrible, a dry sound, like wood cracking, that echoed through the whole house. My mother fell to the floor and lay motionless, with a trickle of blood running from her forehead and spreading across the dirt floor. For a few seconds that seemed like hours. No one moved. The whole world stopped. Even my father stood there, looking at her lying there, with the belt still in his hand. It was as if he himself had been startled by what had just happened. "Mom?" I called softly, dragging myself to her. My voice came out strange, almost a whisper. "Mom, get up. Please get up." But she didn't move. Her eyes were open, but it was as if they weren't seeing anything. They were glazed, lost, looking at a place only she could see. I shook her shoulder. "Mom, answer. Talk to me." That's when she turned her head to me, slowly, very slowly, as if every movement hurt a lot. She managed to whisper with her voice almost fading. "Sandra, my daughter, listen. Listen carefully." "Talk, Mom. I'm listening," I cried, holding her cold hand. "When he sleeps, when he relaxes, you run. Go to Mrs. Wilson's house. Tell everything that happened here. Promise?" "No, Mom, don't talk like that," I cried even more. "We're going to leave here together." "Right now, I'll help you get up and we'll leave." But she shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "No, I can't get up. Sandra, there's something important. Pay attention to his belt. When he takes it off, look carefully at the belt." "What belt, Mom? Why the belt?" "Look carefully. There's blood. It's not just yours. It's not just mine." She was making a terrible effort to speak, as if each word was a mountain. "There was already before. Today, there was already..." At that moment, I didn't completely understand what she wanted to say, but I engraved each word in my memory. My father, who had been standing still this whole time, suddenly reacted. He approached us and said, in a voice that tried to be normal, "She just hit her head. She'll be fine. It's just a bump. Help her get up." But when I tried to help my mother sit up, she groaned in such strong pain that it broke my heart. There was something very wrong happening inside her body. "She needs a doctor," I told my father, trying to keep my voice steady. "She needs to go to the hospital in Montgomery now." "No hospital," he replied dryly, putting the belt back in his pants as if nothing had happened. "She just needs to rest. Tomorrow she'll be fine. Women are resilient." That night was the longest of my life. I carried my mother to her room, with William's help. She lay in bed, moaning softly from time to time, breathing in a strange way, as if each breath was a struggle. I sat on the floor beside the bed, holding her hand, feeling her getting colder and colder. Every hour I'd wet a cloth in the water basin and pass it on her forehead, cleaning the blood that wouldn't stop coming out. My father, after eating dinner, as if nothing had happened, went to sleep. I heard him snoring in the next room, a heavy snore of someone who slept peacefully, without any remorse. It was almost dawn when my mother opened her eyes and looked at me with a clarity that scared me. It was as if she had come back for a few minutes just to give me an important message. "Sandra, pay attention. Listen carefully. His belt, look carefully, when he takes it off, on the buckle. There's old blood, dried blood. It's not from today. There was already. From other times." "Mom, what other times?" "The times that I fell, the times that tripped. He always used the belt, always." She paused, breathing with difficulty. "On the buckle, there's hair, my hair, stuck, for years." At that moment, a terrible truth began to form in my head. The falls down the stairs, the bruises, the purple marks she always explained as accidents. It had all been him. It had always been him. "Sandra, when I'm not here anymore, he'll want you in my place. Promise. Don't let him. Promise you'll tell. Everyone." "Mom, stop talking like that. You're going to be fine. Tomorrow, we're leaving here." But she shook her head. "I won't. I won't make it. But you can. You have to." She closed her eyes and didn't speak anymore. Her breathing became weaker and weaker, more and more spaced out. I stayed there, holding her hand, feeling life slip away little by little. When the sun rose, illuminating the room with a golden light that came through the small window, my mother wasn't breathing anymore. My father woke up, saw her there motionless, and put on an act that disgusted me. He started crying, calling her, pretending desperation. "Elizabeth, my wife, wake up. Don't leave me alone." He called the neighbor, Mr. Charlie from the store, to help take her to the doctor. But everyone already knew it was too late. Dr. Stevens, who was the only doctor in Clarksville at that time, came to our house, examined her, and confirmed it was a massive heart attack. Her heart couldn't take the shock of the fall. And that's how my mother became one more woman who died of a heart attack in Clarksville. One more victim that no one questioned. One more secret that was buried with her. But I knew the truth. And worse, I knew that now I was next in line. When everyone left the wake, when the dust settled, I was going to occupy the place my mother had left vacant. Only this time, it would be different. Because my mother had given me a weapon. She had taught me to look at his belt. And I was going to look very carefully. My dear ones, my mother's wake was scheduled for the next day, on a Thursday. In Clarksville, back then, when someone died, the whole town stopped to pay their condolences. Our small house was packed with people, neighbors, friends, acquaintances from the ranch where my father worked, church ladies who came to pray the rosary. My father was playing the role of grieving widower with a perfection that disgusted me. He had put on the nicest black suit he had combed his hair with brilliantine, and received condolences with a face of suffering that fooled everyone. Poor Bob, I heard Mrs. Wilson whispering to another neighbor. Lost his wife like that, out of nowhere. A heart attack, so young still. Yeah, poor him, the other replied. And now he'll have to raise all these children alone. I was sitting in a corner of the living room, dressed in a black dress the neighbor had lent me, pretending I was in mourning. But inside, I was boiling with rage. Every time someone came to give me their condolences, saying, "Your mother was a saint," or "She's in a better place now," I wanted to scream the truth. It was during the afternoon that I noticed my father doing something strange. He was talking to Mr. Charlie from the store, receiving condolences, when he took off his belt. He said it was too tight, that nervousness had made him swell. He hung the belt on a chair near where I was sitting. At that moment, I remembered my mother's last words. Look carefully at the belt. I waited for everyone to get distracted with the prayers the ladies were doing around the coffin. Slowly, without drawing attention, I got closer to the chair where the belt was hanging. What I saw froze my blood to the bone. The metal buckle, which my father always kept polished and shiny, had dark stains encrusted in the folds. They weren't rust or dirt stains. It was blood, my dear ones. Dried blood, dark, that had been there for a long time. And even worse, stuck in the corners of the buckle, there were strands of hair. Light brown hair, the exact same color as my mother's hair. At that moment, everything made sense. The falls she had, the purple bruises that appeared on her body, the times she tripped on the stairs or hit the corner of the door. It hadn't been any of that. It had been that belt. Always that belt. My father hadn't killed my mother just the day before. He had been killing her little by little, beating by beating, for years. And no one had ever suspected anything. I was there looking at that terrible proof when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. It was my father. "What are you doing there, Sandra?" he asked softly, so no one would hear. "Nothing, Dad. Just saw the belt that fell from the chair." He looked at me with those hard eyes. "Leave that belt there. Don't mess with other people's things." But there was something in the way he spoke, a rush to get me away from there, that made me understand he knew exactly what I had seen. And I knew he knew that I knew. That night, after everyone left, and only our family was left in the empty house with my mother's coffin, my father called me to talk in the yard. "Sandra," he said, lighting a cigarette and slowly releasing the smoke. "Tomorrow, after the burial, things are going to change here at home." "How so, Dad?" "Your mother is no longer here to take care of the house, to care for your younger siblings. You're the oldest now. It's your responsibility to take her place." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What place, Dad?" "The place of the woman of the house, taking care of the food, cleaning, the boys, and taking care of me, too." He took a long drag on the cigarette and looked at me in a way that made me want to run. "The way your mother took care of me." At that moment, I understood everything. He wasn't just talking about household chores. He was talking about me becoming his new victim, taking my mother's place in every sense. And if I refused, if I disobeyed, that belt would be used on me too. I'm still a child, Dad. I'm only 15 years old. Old enough to learn. Your mother was 15 when she married me. And look how well she learned. He threw the cigarette on the ground and stepped on it. "You'll learn too, Sandra. The easy way or the hard way." That dawn, lying on the floor next to my mother's coffin, because it was tradition for someone from the family to stay watching over the body, I made the most important decision of my life. I wasn't going to let him break me like he broke her. I wasn't going to die slowly like my mother died. And I wasn't going to let that man keep pretending he was a victim of fate when in reality he was a murderer. On the day of the burial, which was on a Friday, the whole town went to the Clarksville cemetery. The pastor was about to start the final prayer when I did something that surprised everyone. I got up from the bench where I was sitting and walked to the front of the cemetery chapel where the pastor was with the prayer book in his hand. Everyone went quiet, looking at me, thinking I was going to say something beautiful about my mother. "Pastor," I said, with a voice firmer than I imagined I could manage, "before you start the prayer, I wanted to show something important to everyone who's here." The pastor, who was a kind man named Pastor Michael, was surprised. "What is it, my child?" Without saying anything else, I turned my back to the crowd and lifted my blouse. On my back, there were still fresh and bloody marks from my father's belt. Deep cuts made by the metal buckle, purple and black bruises that covered the entire length of my back. A murmur of horror ran through the crowd. I heard some women scream in shock, others started to cry. The pastor himself was speechless for a few seconds. Then I turned to face everyone and pointed to my father, who was sitting in the first row with the face of someone who had seen a ghost. "The same belt that did this to me last night, killed my mother the night before. He's not a widower, people. He's the murderer." The silence that descended on the cemetery was total. It was as if even the birds had stopped singing. Everyone looked at me, then at my father, then at me again, trying to process what they had just heard. My father got up from the bench as if to say something, but I didn't let him. "He's been killing her slowly for years. All those times she fell down the stairs, that she tripped, that she hit the door. It was a lie. It was him beating her with this belt." "Sandra, you're disturbed by grief." He started to speak, trying to use that worried father voice that fooled everyone. "Disturbed nothing," I shouted. "Look at his belt. Look at the buckle. There's dried blood from my mother stuck there, and there's her hair too, hair that he pulled out from the beatings he gave her." That's when something happened that I didn't expect. Mrs. Wilson, who had known my mother since she was a girl, got up from the middle of the crowd. I always suspected, always thought it was strange, so many accidents. She was crying, but I was afraid to say something. I was afraid of him. Other voices began to join hers. That's right, Elizabeth always had new marks. She became different in recent times. Thinner, quieter. Sergeant Thompson, who was the law enforcement representative in Clarksville, was present at the burial. He approached me. "Girl, are you sure of what you're saying? It's a very serious accusation." "I'm sure, yes, sir, and I can prove it." I looked directly into my father's eyes, who was as pale as paper. "Ask him to take off his belt. Ask to examine the buckle. You'll see my mother's blood that's still there." My father tried to back away, but there were already too many people around him. Sergeant Thompson was firm. "Robert, you're going to have to cooperate. Take off the belt." "This is absurd. My daughter is deranged with grief," my father protested. "I won't submit to this humiliation." But the sergeant wasn't joking. "Either you take it off or I take it off. You choose." With trembling hands, my father took the belt off his pants. The sergeant took the metal buckle and examined it carefully. After a few seconds, his face completely changed. "Good Lord," he murmured. "There really is dried blood here, and strands of hair." He looked at the crowd. "The girl is telling the truth." What happened next was like a storm. Everyone started talking at the same time, asking questions, looking at my father with disgust and anger. Some women came to hug me, crying with me. Others went to look at my mother's coffin with different eyes, finally understanding how she had really died. Sergeant Thompson arrested my father right there, in front of everyone. "Robert Silva, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. We're going to exhume your wife's body for a more detailed investigation." When they took him away in handcuffs, he still tried to look at me with anger, as if I were to blame for everything. But I didn't lower my eyes. I looked back, firmly, until he disappeared in the dust raised by the police car. My mother's burial happened that same day, but now it was different. Now everyone knew the truth. Now she was no longer the woman who died of a heart attack. She was the woman who was murdered by her own husband, slowly, for years. And I, who had spent 15 years of my life afraid of him, was finally free. The marks on my body healed over time. But they had served as the map that led my father to jail, and saved my own life. The Clarksville justice system later confirmed what I already knew. My mother had died of internal bleeding caused by head trauma. The heart attack was invented to hide the crime. My father was sentenced to 20 years in prison for murder and abuse. My siblings and I went to live with our Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, who received us with all the love in the world. And it was there that I began to understand that not all men are like my father, that not all families live in fear, that it's possible to live in peace. My dear ones, here I am today, at 78 years old, telling you this story from my simple little house in Eastwood, Birmingham. It seems impossible that that 15-year-old girl who confronted her own father in a cemetery in Clarksville is the same grandma who's here now, making biscuits early in the morning to sell at the park. Life after that day completely changed. My siblings and I went to live with our Aunt Helen, who was a widow and lived in a bigger house, also in Alabama. She received us with a love I didn't even know existed. For the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to live in a house where people talked without fear, where no one lowered their voice when the man arrived, where children could play and laugh without worrying about waking anyone up. Aunt Helen was a strong, hard-working woman who sewed for others to support herself. She taught me to sew too, and for a few years that's how we lived, me helping her with sewing, taking care of my younger siblings, and slowly learning what it was like to have a real family. It was at Aunt Helen's house that I met my late husband, Joseph. He was the son of a friend of hers, a good, hard-working young man who had come from Birmingham to spend the holidays in Clarksville. I was 17 when we met, and he was the first person who made me understand that men could be affectionate without being violent, that they could have authority without being tyrants. We dated for 2 years, always under Aunt Helen's supervision, as was customary at that time. In 1964, when I turned 19, we got married at the Baptist church, the same one where my mother used to go to her prayer meetings. It was a simple wedding, but full of joy. Aunt Helen made my wedding dress with her own hands, and the whole neighborhood came to bless us. Shortly after the wedding, we came to live here in Birmingham. Joseph worked as a mechanic in a shop downtown, and I continued sewing at home. Our life was simple, but it was ours. We had 3 children: Catherine, who is now 58 years old and lives in Atlanta, William, who is 56 and works as a truck driver here in Birmingham, and the baby Mary, who is 52 years old and is a teacher at a school here in the neighborhood. Joseph was a wonderful husband for all the 45 years we lived together. He died 13 years ago of pneumonia, but left a good longing, you know? A longing for someone who lived a life of love, respect, companionship. Never, in all those years, did he raise his hand to me. Never yelled at me. When we had any disagreement, we talked, like civilized people. Today, my routine is very calm. I wake up every day at 5 in the morning, make my strong black coffee, a habit from the Clarksville days, and start preparing the biscuits. I buy fresh flour at Joe's Market, which is right near my house. I season them with sharp cheddar cheese. Sometimes I make some sweet ones with honey when I have a little extra money. I take the biscuits to the park around 7 in the morning. I already have my regular customers, Mr. Anthony, who works at the bakery and always buys 2 savory biscuits, Mrs. Mary, who comes to get a sweet one for her afternoon snack, the kids who pass by going to school and always stop to buy a little biscuit from Grandma Sandra, as they call me. I really enjoy talking to people at the park. I listen to some people's problems, give advice to others, hear the neighborhood news. It's a simple life, but it's my life, built with my own effort, without fear, without violence. In the afternoon when I come home, I get visits from my grandchildren. Junior, who is Mary's son, always comes to do homework with me. He's 12 years old and too smart. He wants to know everything, asks 1,000 questions about what life was like in the old days. Sometimes I tell some stories, the good stories, of course, about what Clarksville was like in my time, about the games we played in the street. I have 4 other grandchildren too, 2 of Catherine's children, who live in Atlanta, and 2 of William's daughters, who come to visit me every weekend. The house becomes a party when they're all here. We make a big lunch, talk, laugh, and I look at this family I helped form and thank God for giving me the strength to get here. In the evening, I like to sit on my house's porch and water my plants. I have ferns, petunias, some small roses I planted in an old can. It's my moment of peace when I reflect on life, on how much I've been through, on how much I've achieved. Sometimes, when I'm there watering the plants, watching the movement on the street, I remember my mother. I think about what she would say if she saw how our family turned out, how the children she protected grew up well, how her grandchildren are happy and healthy. I think she'd be proud, proud to see that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. My brother Thomas lives nearby too. He works as a construction worker and comes to visit me every Tuesday. We have coffee together and talk about the old days. William, my brother, not my son, still lives in Alabama, has a big family there. Franny got married and moved to New York, but always sends news. Here in Birmingham, in Eastwood, I feel at home. This is where I built my real life, where I raised my children, where I grew old beside Joseph. When I go out in the morning to sell the biscuits and see the city's movement, people running to work, children going to school, I feel enormous gratitude for being alive, for having made it here. I don't have luxury, I don't have material wealth, but I have something many people don't have. I have peace. I have the peaceful sleep of someone who did what had to be done, who faced fears, who chose the truth even when it was dangerous. I have the joy of seeing my grandchildren growing up in a family where love truly exists, where women are respected, where children can be children. And each biscuit I sell, each smile I receive at the park, each hug from my grandchildren is proof that it was worth fighting. It was worth having courage that day at the cemetery. It was worth breaking the silence. My dear ones, after telling you this whole story, my heart is heavy but also full of hope. Heavy because remembering all this still hurts, even after so many years. But full of hope because I know my story can help someone who's going through a similar situation. If you who are listening to me now live in a house where you're afraid, where you're beaten, where you're humiliated, where someone hurts you and then pretends nothing happened, I want to tell you something very important. This is not normal. It's not a man's way. It's not family custom. It's not punishment you deserve. It's a crime, and you don't have to take it. I know it's hard to report. I know that fear hits, that shame, that thought of, who's gonna believe me? I went through that too. I spent years seeing my mother get beaten and didn't know what to do, didn't know how to help. But when I reached my limit, when I saw that either I did something or I was going to die like her, I found a courage I didn't even know I had. Courage doesn't come out of nowhere, my children. It comes when we understand that our life is worth more than fear. When we understand that we weren't born to be anyone's punching bag. When we understand that our children, our siblings, deserve to live in a house where no screaming is heard, no violence is seen. That belt dirty with blood that my father used to beat me and kill my mother became the evidence that put him in jail. The marks on my back, which hurt so much, became the map that led me to freedom. Sometimes, our wounds are the only witnesses we have. Don't be ashamed to show them when necessary. Today, when I see my grandchildren playing in the yard without fear, when I see my daughter being respected by her husband, when I sleep peacefully without hearing screams or blows, I'm grateful I had courage that day at the cemetery. It was the hardest decision of my life, but it was the one that saved me. And for you who can help someone, pay attention to the signs. That neighbor who always has bruises from falls, that friend who's getting quieter and quieter, that relative who isolated herself from the family. Sometimes an offer of help, you can count on me, can be the difference between someone's life and death. In any country in the world, there are authorities and organizations ready to help those who suffer domestic violence. Look for them in your region. Seek help from the police, hospitals, churches, schools. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. My dear ones who followed me to the end of this story, you who had the courage to hear this difficult truth, do something for this grandma here. Subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel and turn on the notification bell. It's not just to help the channel grow, no. It's because stories like this need to be told, need to reach those who need to hear them. How many women out there are suffering in silence like my mother suffered? How many children are afraid like I was? And leave just one word in the comments, one word that proves you watched until the end. Write strength. Because that's what saved me. That's what can save other people too. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. This story can reach someone who needs it today, at this exact moment. A hug full of affection from Grandma Sandra. May God bless you and protect your families.